The room fell into utter silence. The gunfire had rung out with brutal precision, bullets piercing through bodies, faces, the air itself. Blood painted the walls, screams died in throats before they could even rise. Everyone shut their eyes, unable to bear the horror unraveling before them. Then a scream, a cry that tore through the stunned silence. "Edwin, no! What have you done?" His voice cracked, raw with disbelief. He staggered forward, his eyes wide as he dropped to his knees beside the motionless figure lying in a pool of blood. Mr. Jones' head had been struck, his body swept in crimson, his eyes closed, still gun. Jungkook stood frozen, unable to process how fast it had all happened. The room around him blurred. One rushed to Jungkook, throwing her arms around his shaking body. She held him tightly, desperately. She could feel his heartbeat pounding in his chest, erratic and fast. He wrapped his arms around her, but his grip trembled, weakening. "Edwin, you killed him," he roared. Tears streaked down his face as he reached for his pistol, fury replacing grief in an instant. His hand trembled as he pointed it downward, preparing to raise and fire. In one swift motion, snatched the gun from Wine's hand and struck Edwin's arms. The gun clattered to the floor as Edwin screamed in pain. Without hesitation, Jungkook turned the weapon and fired. The bullet hit Edwin square in the head. His body collapsed to the ground, lifeless. At that exact moment, Jungkook's team burst into the room, armed, ready, and furious. The surviving members stormed in, rescuing the rest of the hostages. The nightmare was ending, but Jungkook? His breath was shallow, his legs buckled beneath him. He collapsed to the ground. One fell with him, clutching his body as it hit the floor. One rushed to Jungkook and wrapped her arms around his trembling body. Her own chest rose and fell rapidly with panic. Tears streamed down her face, her silent cries etching through her expression. She tried to scream, tried to make a sound, but nothing came. Her mouth opened, but no words escaped, only a breathless gasp, raw and voiceless. She clutched his shirt with shaking hands, begging him to stay awake, her eyes pleading with his. Her silent sob convulsed through her body as she gently tapped his cheek, shook his shoulder, desperate for him to respond. Jungkook looked up at her barely, as if wanting to speak. His lips moved, but the strength in him was fading. Wine leaned in, her tears falling onto his skin. Her hands gripped his face, trying to hold onto him, trying to will him back to her. His eyes slowly closed, and then darkness. The sterile scent of antiseptic lingered in the air. Jungkook slowly blinked open his eyes. Everything was blurry at first, like he was underwater. His vision gradually cleared, revealing the white ceiling above, the faint beeping of machine beside him, and the soft hum of the hospital. He turned his head slightly, groaning inwardly from the strain. Beside him, with her head resting gently on the edge of his bed, Wine sat asleep. Her eyes were closed, her hand barely brushing his. Jungkook's throat burned with thirst. He slowly reached for the glass of water placed nearby, but his fingers trembled too much. The glass tipped, fell, and shattered on the floor with a sharp clang. One jolted awake. Her eyes met Jungkook's, and they widened with shock and relief. She instantly got up, grabbed another glass, poured water, and held it gently to his lips. He drank slowly. His eyes looked on hers. Jungkook was quite confused, but deeply observant. Seeing her this close, her eyes swollen from sleeplessness and worry, it startled him. One stood up without a word and stepped out of the room. Moments later, a team of doctors entered. One of them checked Jungkook's vitals, scribbled something on his chart, then turned to him with a professional smile. "Doctor, you are doing great. You will be well enough to go home by tomorrow," he said before leaving the room. Wyan returned with a tray of food. Without waiting for instructions, she began to feed him, spoon by spoon, gently. Jungkook watched her in silence, the tenderness in her movements. It was hard to ignore. Then he spoke, voice low but steady. "Jungkook, Mr. Jun told you something, didn't he? That's why you pointed the gun at me." Wine hesitated. She looked down for a moment. Then, as always, she used her hand to communicate. Her fingers moved, her expression shifted, and slowly she told him everything. Jungkook listened. He didn't interrupt. When she finished, Jungkook looked into her eyes, asked softly, "Jungkook, then why did you save me?" Why didn't say anything in response. She only smiled gently, then shook her head as if the answer was far too complicated for even words to explain. Flashback that day. Sit beside Jean, the laptop open in front of her. They had just finished lunch, but she could not hold it any longer. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. Wine, tell me the truth. Jean read the words. His face stiffened. He looked away. Jean, I don't know if I should. Jungkook wanted to tell you himself. Wine's expression hardened. She insisted again. Jean sighed. Jean, alright, but this wasn't supposed to come from me. Wine's eyes were steady, locked on his every word. Jean, that day your mother arrived at the conflict site. Just as things were turning bloody, Mr. John, he tried to shoot her. He aimed straight for her chest. Wine's fingers trembled on her lap. Jean, but we got her out. Jungkook was the one who arranged for her to be moved to a rescue hospital. He didn't tell you because maybe he was waiting for the right time. Your mother, she is in America, safe, healing. She will return home once she is fully recovered. Wine could not stop the tears. They spilled silently down her cheeks. Jean, Jungkook didn't want to hide it forever. He just didn't want to burden you with more pain while you were already struggling. The flashback faded. Back in the hospital, Jungkook's eyes dropped to the bedsheet. His voice was low, regretful. Jungkook, I wanted to tell you, I really did, but you never wanted to see me. You would not even look at me. Then everything spiraled out of control. I didn't know how to fix it. Wan slowly lifted her hands. Wan, I'm sorry. Jungkook smiled faintly. A nurse entered, checked the IV, and then administered a light sedative. Within minutes, Jungkook's breathing evened out. He drifted back into sleep. Jimin walked into the room and found Wan still sitting beside the bed, her hands resting Jungkook's. Jimin, you have done enough for now, he said softly. Go home, get some rest, wear hair, come back tonight if you want. Wan nodded silently. She gave Jungkook one last look and then walked out of the room. After a week of pains, chaos, and near-death silence, Jungkook was finally home. The sterile white walls of the hospital were behind him. The weight of everything still lingered in the air. He lay quietly in his room, the soft hum of the night outside sleeping in through the window. Then a knock. Jungkook, come in, he said softly. The door cracked open and one stepped inside. Her head was bowed, her fingers fiddling with the hem of her sleeves. She didn't speak, but she didn't have to. Jungkook watched her, puzzled and quiet. Jungkook, did you want to say something? Wan raised her hand slowly, motioned with careful signs. I want to stay with you. Jungkook froze. He wasn't sure if he had heard her right, or if his heart had simply wanted to hear it. But her eyes told him everything, soft, unsure, but full of something real. Jungkook, why? All of a sudden, he whispered, his voice cocked in his throat. She didn't answer. Her gaze dropped to the floor. Her fingers played nervously with each other. Jungkook swallowed and shifted. Jungkook, okay. She walked forward, hesitant steps like the silence before a storm. She sat beside him on the bed, then slowly lay down. They were inches apart, breathing the same air, but saying nothing. Neither of them could speak. Their silence was louder than any words. The moonlight spilled in through the window, and a shimmer caught Jungkook's eyes. It was Jungkook's ring. His breath caught. Jungkook, that ring, it belongs to my mother. He said softly, I kept it with me for years. I always thought one day, if I found someone who truly stayed, I would give it to her. His eyes welled, but she said nothing. She listened deeply. Jungkook went on, for once allowing his voice to carry feelings he always buried. Words came slowly, wrapped in the emotion he always kept hidden. Wine looked down at the bandage on his arms, then the scars beneath them, bullet marks, knife wounds, a life of violence and pain. He noticed her staring. Jungkook, oh this, he said almost shyly, scars from old fights. One reached out slowly. Her fingers brushed against one of the marks. Her touch was feathering, but it sent a shiver down his spine. Her hands, trembling slightly, followed the lines of the wounds as if reading a history written in silence. His heartbeat quickened. So did hers. The air shifted. It became warmer, heavier, charged. Jungkook reached for her hand. Their eyes met, two souls that had been silent for too long, now screaming through a single glance. He leaned closer. One closed her eyes. When Jungkook kissed her, it wasn't rushed or hungry. It was soft, deep, a moment where every word they never said was finally spoken. Time slowed. In the quick that followed, nothing else mattered. Only breath, touch, and two hearts finding home in each other. After everything that happened, life finally began to return to normal. Jungkook had wanted to go back to the city house, but Wan refused. She had fallen in love with the peace and beauty of the countryside, nature, the calm, the simplicity. It gave her comfort. Left with no choice, Jungkook decided to stay as well. Today, however, the house felt different. There was a special kind of joy in the air. Wine was glowing with happiness. Her mother was coming to visit after so long. Everyone in the house was busy preparing, cleaning, cooking, decorating. Soon, Wine's mother arrived. One rushed downstairs and, the moment she saw her, threw her arms around her mother and began to cry. Her mother, equally overwhelmed, hugged her back tightly, tears streaming down her own cheeks. Jungkook, Jin, Jimin, and V stood quietly at a distance, watching the emotional reunion. Wine's mother whispered gently, Wine's mom, don't cry anymore, my baby. Wine kept touching her mother's arms, her face, checking if everything was truly real, if her mother was really okay. Her mother smiled softly and placed a kiss on her forehead and cheek. Wine then led her mother to the living room. Her mother looked at the boys and said warmly, Wine's mom, why are you all standing there? Come here. All four walked up to her and she kissed each one on the forehead. Wine's mom, I used to think if only I had a son, maybe he would have been there to protect and support us. Her voice trembled slightly, but now I realize I don't have just one, I have four. She took Wine and Jungkook by the hand and made them sit together on the couch. Looking at them, she smiled. Wine's mom, now this looks perfect. Both Wine and Jungkook turned red, saying nothing. Jungkook quickly changed the topic. Jungkook, mom, shall we go eat? They moved to the dining table. Today all the dishes had been made to suit her mother's tastes. Seeing it all, Wine's mother was overwhelmed. Jin said with pride, Jin, Wine cooked most of this. She spent the whole day in the kitchen. Her mother looked at Wine with pride. Wine's mom, my little girl has become such a homemaker. Wine looked down shyly at her plate. They laughed, chatted, and enjoyed their meal together. The whole day passed with Wine spending the most of it inside her mother's room. She didn't want to leave her side. As night fell, Jungkook paced restlessly around their bedroom. Jungkook, it's been so long. Why hasn't she come yet? He muttered, clearly impatient. Finally, he could not wait any longer and quietly walked toward Wine's mother. Just as he reached the door, a gentle breeze pushed it open. Wine's mother noticed him. Wine's mom, come in, Jungkook, she said kindly. He entered and sat beside them. Wine's mom, I didn't even get a proper chance to talk to your son, she said, her voice soft. Jungkook smiled. Jungkook, from now on, we will talk every day. They chatted for a while, but Jungkook could not stay patient anymore. He started giving Wine subtle gestures, trying to signal her to live with him, but Wine, caught up in the conversation, didn't catch on. Wine's mother noticed everything. Wine's mom, oh dear, how did I forget? You two are newlyweds. I should not keep you apart at night, she teased. Both Wine and Jungkook turned scarlet. Wine looked down and Jungkook scratched his head, embraced. Wine's mom, go on now. Her mother smiled. No need to be shy. Wine and Jungkook left the room quietly. As soon as they were in their bedroom, Wine lightly smacked Jungkook's shoulder and sighed, Wine, you completely embraced me in front of mom. Jungkook winced dramatically. Jungkook, ouch, hey, I tried my best to get your attention. How was I supposed to know mom was watching me? Besides, she was the one who told us to go. I'm just following orders. Wine blushed and turned away, falling straight onto the bed, covering her face. Jungkook laughed softly and lay beside him, gently pulling her into his arms. Slowly, they both drifted into sleep, safe, warm together. A few days later, Wan wandered through the house one sunny afternoon, taking in its calm charm. Her eyes landed on an old piano. She sat down and began pressing keys, trying to make a tune, but no notes would not flow. Then suddenly she felt a warm hand over hers. Fingers guided hers over the keys, pressing the right notes. She turned her head, and there was Jungkook. The melody that followed was soft and sweet, almost like a lullaby from the past. One smiled, her fingers dancing along with his on the piano. The two of them were caught, completely lost in the moment. When the song ended, Jungkook leaned over and kissed her gently on the lips. Jungkook, this piano, he whispered. My mom used to play it. She loved music. My father bought it just for her. One listened quietly. Then, with rare boldness, she kissed Jungkook on the cheek. Surprised, he stared at her, eyes wide. He leaned in for another kiss, but Wan quickly got up and ran out laughing. Jungkook chuckled and ran after her, the sound of their laughter echoing through the house, a house now filled with music, memories, and love. Everything was peaceful now. The darkness that once surrounded their lives had lifted, and with it, all the bloodshed, the enmity had faded away. Jungkook had finally returned home after a long time. The house was filled with warmth, familiar faces, and laughter, but there was one face he could not find. "Jungkook, where is Wine?" he asked, glancing around. Everyone smiled mysteriously. Wine's mom chuckled and said, "Wine's mom, go upstairs, see for yourself." Jungkook climbed the stairs slowly, his heart beating just a little faster than usual. As he reached the top, he noticed that the lights were off and the room was cloaked in darkness. Confused, he stood still. Suddenly, click, the lights came on. There she was. One stood in the middle of the room, a soft glow surrounding her. In her hands was a small box. She walked toward him slowly, her eyes shimmered with emotion, and handed him the box. Jungkook looked puzzled. "Jungkook, what's inside?" One gently gestured for him to open it. He opened the box and froze. Inside was a tiny pair of baby shoes. His brows furrowed. "Jungkook, these are so small." As he picked them up, he noticed something written at the bottom of the box. His eyes read the words, aloud in a whisper, his voice trembling. "Welcome home, Papa." Tears filled Jungkook's eyes and slowly rolled down his cheeks. His gaze met Wine's. She nodded softly, her expression radiant. Overwhelmed, Jungkook pulled her into his arms and spun her around with joy. He kissed her again and again, unable to contain his happiness. Wine laughed silently, her eyes resting on his chest. As their kiss broke, he set her gently back down. "Jungkook, I'm so happy, Wine. Just tell me what you want." "Anything." Wine looked into his eyes, and then, for the first time, she found the courage to speak. She sighed. "Wine, I want you to leave the mafia behind. I want us to have a normal life. I don't want our child to grow up in the kind of world we did." Jungkook fell silent. The weight of her words stung into him. Wine's heart pounded. She feared his silence. She feared his answer. But after what felt like a lifetime, Jungkook looked at her and said quietly, "Jungkook, okay, whatever you want, it's yours." Wine's face lit up. She threw her arms around him, burying her face in his chest. Jungkook wrapped his arms around her and pressed a kiss to her forehead. Several years later, life was so beautiful. Jungkook and Wine had a daughter, a bright, talkative little girl who filled their home with joy. Her name was Jia. She had grown up enough to go to school now, and every day brought something new. That afternoon, Wine was in the kitchen cooking. Jungkook had just returned home from picking Jia up from school. As they entered the house, Jia ran straight to her mother and hugged her tightly, tears welling up in her eyes. Wine lifted her up gently. "Wine, what happened, sweetheart? Why are you crying?" Jungkook walked in behind them, clearly fuming. Wine looked confused. "Wine, what's going on? Why is she crying like this?" Jungkook folded his arms. "Jungkook, ask your daughter. She will explain it better than I." Jia sniffled and said innocently, "Jia, I just told him my boyfriend gave me chocolate today." Wine nearly dropped the spoon in her hand. "Wine, hot boyfriend, who taught you that?" Jia pouted. "Jia, why? Jimin uncle said if he is your friend and he is a boy, then he is your boyfriend." Wine's eyes widened. She looked at Jungkook. Jungkook didn't wait a second. "Jungkook, Jimin!" he roared, echoed through the house. Within moments, everyone came running downstairs. Jimin appeared, saw Jungkook's furious face and froze. "Jungkook, what happened?" he asked cautiously. Jungkook's jaw clenched. "Jungkook, should I explain it with words or fists?" Before Jimin could answer, Jungkook lunged at him. Jimin quills and ran for his life. Jin and V stepped in quickly, trying to separate them. After some struggle, they finally calmed things down. V sighed. "V, do you two ever stop? This has become your daily routine." Jin laughed. "Jin, honestly, I'm starting to enjoy the drama." Suddenly Jia spoke up again, completely unaware the chaos she was causing. "Jia, Mama, I have invited my boyfriend to our house tomorrow." Jimin burst out laughing. "Jimin, of course, I will personally bring him here." That was the last straw. Jungkook lunged again. "Jungkook, you're dead, Jimin." Jimin yelped and ran for his life, with Jungkook chasing him around the house. Wine sighing. "Wine, here we go again." Wan's mother peeked out to her room, confused by the commotion. Wan's mom, what's happening out here? Jean grinned. Jean, we will explain it later, mom. Jia looked around, utterly confused. Jia, what did I do this time?